Welcome to the Mrs. R Relevant Daily Draft Podcast, brought to you by the Draft Professor. The Draft Professor is a group of podcasters bringing you daily draft podcasts and is home to the only dynamic mock draft simulator which allows fans to mock draft against other fans. The Draft Professor Simulator features a first-round challenge, 5 unique one-round drafts. The Draft Professor Simulator features a second-round challenge, 10 unique two-round drafts. All mock drafts are always picking against the fans and draft analysts which use the simulator. Every mock, every pick, every time. The Draft Professor also features ranked players functionality, where you can rank your favorite players at every position. Optionally, you can add tiers to your rankings to show what round you have the players graded in. The Draft Professor also features Draft a Team functionality, which allows users to snake draft a team of 22 players to demonstrate your my guys, compare player strengths, and discuss draft prospects in a way no other mock draft simulator can. Thank you for tuning in to the Mrs. R Relevant Daily Draft Podcast. This episode will begin shortly. Well, welcome to the late night Wednesday edition of Mrs. R Relevant, the Daily Draft Podcast. Joined today with Bill. So, Bill, how is your Wednesday night going?
It is going good, Jim, here on Wednesday night on The Late Show. Obviously, for those of you who tune in regularly, my co-host, Jacob, not with us tonight. But, Jacob, if you're watching, I hope that I can carry the load of the Wednesday night show for the both of us. But tonight we're going to do something a little different. Most people right now are probably still talking about their 2025 big boards and 2025 NFL draft. But here at the Draft Professor, we're going to get you prepped going into summer scouting because people like me grind the tape all year long and already started a big board for 2026. But before we get too into that, let's do a little housekeeping here. Make sure, if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you like the video. Make sure you share the video with us as well. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel and click that notification bell so you get notified when we go with daily draft content. Sometimes twice a night. If you tuned in earlier, you saw EJ and Cole talking about Fangio scheme, which is absolutely A1 content. Make sure you follow my lovely host for the evening, Jim at NFL Draft Fanatic, no I in Fanatic over on X. You can follow me on X as well at Spark Scouting, as well as all of my written material is over at the Right Way Sports Network at twsn.net. But Jim, anything else you want to add before we dive in?
Yeah, I just want to add that, it's a pleasure having you on the channel, right? Because you've got your 2026 board at least, and let's change that. We have a 2026 player list. We're not making any claims as to where any of these players are on the board. Our goal is to say, here's the players that we're watching, and we think they're going to be pretty high on the board, but we're not sitting here trying to make a top 10 list.
Yep.
These are players that you have already watched and that you know that you're going to be watching again, correct?
That is correct. Yeah. These are players that during my 2025 scouting, I watched, I identified them as guys that if they came out this year, great. But if they went back to school next year, when I start in the summer, these are guys that I'm going to have right at the top of my list. But let's get into it. Let's dive in. So these are my lists, my player lists, as I like to call them. And we'll start with quarterbacks. And there is a significant amount of names at quarterbacks. Some of the top names that you're going to hear, obviously, Arch Manning out of Texas, Nico Iamaleava out of Tennessee, Lenoris Sellers from South Carolina. The big ones that I want to call some attention to is Garrett Nussmeier from LSU. And we talk about Garrett Nussmeier. This is a guy who was going to come out of school this year into the draft, decided to go back for another season. You know, natural arm talent just jumps off the tape at you. When I watched him in the LSU games this year, especially in the Vanderbilt game, which, again, that is a must-watch game if you want to go see how well he performs. It just jumps off the tape. The arm talent is just there. He also shows really good touch layering his passes, which was on showcase display in the Ole Miss game. Another definite fun watch there as well. This guy is going to be talked about heavily as we move through the summer and the fall. There's folks already calling him QB1. Again, this is a must watch for you. If you are a quarterback fan, if your team needs a quarterback after 2025 and you're looking forward to 2026, Garrett Nussmeier is going to be your guy. Another guy that I would like to call attention to when we talk about quarterbacks, Haynes King from Georgia Tech. And you're probably saying to yourself, well, there's not a whole lot of tape for Haynes King outside of the Georgia game, but that Georgia game showcased what he could really be about as a quarterback prospect. 26 of 36, 303 yards, 2 touchdowns, showcased his very good arm strength and the fact that he's a twitchy athlete. This guy's got really good wheels for a quarterback, but he's also not the type of quarterback that's going to take off and run with it. He does have very good pocket presence, the ability to extend plays down the field, a very quick trigger. This ball gets out of his hands quickly. It gets out of his hands on time. He's not going to be talked about as much because obviously it's more of a projection when you have one really good game on your tape. And then outside of that, you don't have anything. So looking at 2026, this is a guy that I'm going to be looking for as we move into the fall as a must watch. How does he perform at Georgia Tech with some of the talent around him, like an Eric Singleton, who's also on the wide receiver playlist? But let's move into running backs now. Obviously, the big names on the list that I've got: Jeremiah Love from Notre Dame, guys like Nick Singleton and Katron Allen at Penn State, Jonah Coleman at Washington, even some other guys like Mark Fletcher out of Miami. But let's spend a little time starting in the ACC. Detrell Jones out of Boston College. Again, a bit more of a projection for him. There's not a whole lot of tape behind him, not a whole lot of statistical analysis behind him, but very electrifying. This guy is lightning in a bottle personified. And going into next season, I'm excited to see how he does at Boston College, especially as a playmaker in the passing game as well. He's a very capable receiver, very good hands, very good hand-eye coordination as well to snatch the ball away. Possibly could be one of the best pass-catching running backs in all of college football next season. Again, more of a projection there. Also has the ability to get small, squeeze through traffic with ease, which is to be expected when you're talking about him being around 5'8", 185 pounds. So a little bit on the smaller side when you're looking at that running back position. But I think he's going to be an electric player and a must-watch for me. The other must-watch that we look at, Jeremiah Love from Notre Dame. Obviously, when everybody hears Jeremiah Love, they hear about the great season he had, except for the national championship game where he just fell flat on his face with 4 yards total. But you watch the rest of his tape the entirety of the way, 163 carries, over 1,100 yards, 17 touchdowns, produced well, a burner with track speed. He's got the juice to burn. This is a guy that's going to take off and go. Loose hips, very electric laterally. Probably one of the best lateral moving running backs of not only the 2026 class, but I'd also argue if you put him in the 2025 class, he'd be that same way. Also, another very good pass catcher, very natural hands out of the backfield, very good route tree coming out of the backfield. So a very good duplicate weapon, and this guy, he's like the old school NBA player that loves to break ankles. That's what this guy does. That's what Love does, is he's willing to take players' ankles and just break them. And that's what you're going to get with him. And he is a must-watch, must-see TV player as you head into the 2026 draft class. The next player, obviously at wide receiver, there's some names, there's some heavy hitters. You look at Carnell Tate from Ohio State, Kevin Concepcion at Texas A&M, Nick Harbert at South Carolina, Antonio Williams at Clemson. Just some heat in this wide receiver class. And there's guys that could have come out this year that went back. Jim and I talked about it before we went on the air. Nick Anderson and Barrion Brown at LSU with Garrett Nussmeier in that offense, the LSU offense. You could throw a dart at any player on that field and you're probably going to hit a must-watch type of guy. But the big one that I call attention to, my guy from this class that's now a must-watch as he moves down to Florida with DJ Lagway, is J. Michael Sturdivant, formerly of LSU, now heading down to Florida. 6'3", 205, just a big body guy, super athletic. Actually made the Feldman Freak list in 2023 because he topped out at over 23 miles an hour. He's got the juice. He's got the size. very good body control and a very good catch radius and some good hands. Also has a willingness to block in the run game, and that's overlooked at wide receiver. We don't often see wide receivers that want to block, but we've talked about it. Even me and Jacob talked about it several times in this show. You got to block to get the rock, and J. Michael Sturdivant's going to get that at Florida. You look at his tape at UCLA, and there's not a lot of production, but the one game I do mention when you want to see what he can truly be is that USC game, 5 catches, 117 yards, and showcased every key component of his game.
Okay.
So,
and before we flip, I guess one other thing to point out, we're not saying that all of these players will be in the draft, right? Because like I see Arch Manning on the list for quarterbacks,
yes,
and there's no guarantee he has the ability to come in the draft. But like when we're looking at a player list like this, I just want to put the disclaimer out there. We don't know that they're in the draft. These are the players that we're watching, right?
Yes. These are all guys that are draft eligible, so they're redshirt sophomores and above. They're draft eligible, but we're not saying Arch Manning's coming out in 26. We're not saying Lenora Sellers is coming out as a redshirt sophomore. These are guys that are all, hey, they could come out pending their season. They have a great season, they're coming. If they're not, they're going back. But we want you to be aware of, hey, yes, these are the guys that could be coming in 2026.
Yeah. So we want to make sure, I want to make sure anybody listening to this, because we do have people that leave comments on YouTube that we know that they're not all eligible. Or let me rephrase it. We know that they're not all going to come out, but this is the list of the players that we're watching, and you are going to see this list grow. We will be podcasting every week during the summer, and this list is going to keep growing. So this is what we're starting with, and you will see 20 draft professors adding to this list over the summer. So, okay.
Absolutely. Yeah, so my next list is tight end, and when you look at the tight end list, there's some unknowns behind it. This tight end class, a lot of these guys are going to be guys that I'm going to spend time watching in 2026, especially in the summer, because there's a lot of unknown behind it. There's not like a Brock Bowers or even a Tyler Warren, a household name going into the season that people were like, I gotta watch him. But if I had to pick one guy that would be a must-watch guy for me, it's Brett Norfleet from Missouri. Just because when you look at his size, 6'7", 235, guys at his size, they don't grow on trees. You throw in the fact that, he's a very good route runner, has very good hands for the minimal production that he had at Missouri. Obviously, when you have guys like Theo Weiss and Luther Burden III, they're going to take a majority of the snaps, especially when you have a quarterback like Brady Cook, who's not actually the greatest quarterback on planet Earth. Definitely a lot to be desired in terms of his production. But Norfleet is a guy very physical, has potential as a blocker, but that's not his game. Is athletic, pass catcher, big body type of guy. And that's where I would leave Norfleet out of Missouri. But there's some definite guys here. Jaleel Skinner from Louisville, Tanner Koziel from Wisconsin, Eli Stowers from Vanderbilt as well. Another guy to keep your eye on as we move through the summer. You look at the offensive line class and the offensive line group, and I've kind of grouped them together between tackle and guard. And I typically do that going into the summer just because we don't know who's going to end up where. A guy who goes out of the season as a guard may go into next season as a tackle, and vice versa. He may kind of flip it. But there's some definite guys when you look at this class that have been talked about as going to be household names in 2026. Obviously, Francis Malagoa from Miami, Caden Proctor from Alabama, Spencer Fano from Utah, and Caleb Lomu from Utah. But there's going to be a lot of guys to keep your eye on as we move through the 2026 class. The big one, though, is Evan Tengengisdal. I probably butchered that, and I'm sorry, Evan, if you're watching. But from Cincinnati, so you think, a little bit on the smaller school side, so he's not very great. But this is a guy that when he's got a grip on you, you are not going anywhere. He has a very strong grip, very good in pass protection, especially for a guy played on the interior last year at the guard position, but he takes pride in the run game. This is a guy who says, I'm going to put on my hard hat and just go to work and move some people out of the way by any means necessary. I think when it's all said and done, and we take a look at him going into 2026, coming out of the summer, this is a guy that's not only a must watch, but this is a guy that you would sit in the lab for 3 hours watching the tape over and over and over again because you just enjoy it so much as an offensive line fan.
Yep. And I want to give a shout out because I believe Armaj Reed Adams will be in this draft class too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So I want to give that shout out because I remember when Owen watched him when we were doing scouting reports, Owen got excited.
Yeah.
And then he went back to school. So definitely we'll want to add, there's at least one more name we know we can add. So
yeah,
awesome.
Absolutely. No, definitely got to keep your eye on too in Armaj Reed Adams. But now we flip to the defensive side of the ball. And if you're looking for another kind of defensive heavy class, there's some guys at the top. There's definite guys. TJ Parker out of Clemson, Ruben Bain from Miami, Patrick Payton from LSU, formerly of Florida State, went back to school, Mateo Ugalele from Oregon. The guy I want to look at, though, is Braylon Shelby from USC. When you look at Braylon Shelby's game, he's very good side to side. He's a very good lateral edge. Excellent feel for working off of blockers and kind of knowing what they're doing. It showcases a really good football IQ as an edge rusher. This is a guy who has a high motor and is a technically savvy edge rusher. He's going to do a lot of things with his hands. He is the true edge rusher, hand down, man down type of guy. You watch his tape, you watch the Texas A&M game at the end of the season, 4 tackles on a sack, but you saw him just making life hell on earth for that Texas A&M offensive line. And I think he's going to definitely be a must watch. If you haven't watched him yet, go find some USC tape, find a friend who's got some USC tape, go find your neighbor and tell him to sign up and get some USC tape and have a watch party because you won't be disappointed. I promise. But then we get to the big men in the middle. And the big men in the middle, there's some guys that went back to school that you should be excited about. DeMonte Capehart from Clemson. Some other names to be excited about. Jordan Vandenberg down at Georgia Tech. Zane Durant at Penn State. But the big one is the godfather of the defensive line. It's Dante Corleone out of Cincinnati. Was draft eligible this year, decided to go back to school. This was a guy was trending very well in the 2025 class, then had the blood clot issues. But this guy is a high impact level defender for the middle of that Cincinnati defense. Super athletic. He made the Feldman Freaks list. Bench, and I'm just going to throw some numbers out here. Bench presses 485, squats 605, deadlifts 700 pounds, runs a 4.68 shuttle, and has been clocked at 18 miles an hour. That is a runaway freight train that I would not want to be in front of at any point in my life. He is a true bull in a china shop, and if you are in his way, he's going to push you out of the way with exceptional power. And if you're not hip to his game, the UCF game last year, a multi-sack game, and just push that offensive lineman around. And that would be the tape that I would tell you, go put it on in your living room, go put it on in your office, go put it on in your bedroom, go put it on in your Tesla on the screen. Don't drive and watch the tape, please. I don't advocate for tape grinding and driving, folks. This is a safe space podcast, but go watch it. You will enjoy it every single time.
Cool. And then I believe, so this is going to be our last board here.
Yeah, so we look at the linebackers, and there's a lot of linebackers in this year's class that are draft eligible, may still have some growing to do, but guys like Amari Campbell from North Carolina, who is a must-watch guy for me that I'll come back to, but Anthony Hill from Texas, Drake Bowen from Notre Dame, Harold Perkins from LSU could have came out this year, returned to school. Same thing for some other guys, Deontay Lawson, Lander Barton out of Utah, Sonny Styles from Ohio State. But Amari Campbell is the big one, linebacker at North Carolina. Just a quick burst, very explosive guy, clean open field tackler. Like his tackling is teach tape, and I'm sure that Bill Belichick is out there listening somewhere with a sleeveless hoodie and nodding his head in approval at Amari Campbell's tackling tape. Bill, if you're watching, my DMs are open. I'd love to come down to Chapel Hill for a week, but nonetheless, he's also very rangy, very instinctive as a zone defender. This is a guy who does very well in pass coverage. A definite my guy to watch. Watching his tape, especially against NC State, 9 tackles, sack and a half, was all over the field, up, down, left, right, was a cheat code at the linebacker position. So he's definitely a guy, if you haven't heard of him, get him on your must-watch list. Go check out some North Carolina tape. Then we move into DBs. We'll start with cornerbacks, which are near and dear to my heart. It's one of the first groups we podcasted here at Mrs. R Relevant with me and Randall, and cornerbacks and wide receivers. But this cornerback class is shaping up to look like a good one. There's a lot of good players to watch. Tacario Davis, formerly of Arizona, now at Washington, went back to school. Malik Muhammad at Texas. Jermaine Matthews at Ohio State. Mansour Delane, formerly of Virginia Tech. Now he's at LSU, which, if I haven't said it enough, there's a lot of LSU talent. So if you want to pick a school to start with, throw on some LSU tape, because I guarantee every which way you sneeze, you're going to find somebody that's draft eligible that's a must-watch guy. But let's go to Smith Snowden from Utah. And when you look at his game, this is a guy that, probably profiles based on his size more as a nickel, but I think has the ability to play the boundary, a change of direction ability, but does really well in press coverage. Has good change of direction ability, and can get laterally very quickly. He's also a really capable hitter in run support. This is a guy that has no problems laying a hammer and hitting somebody and trying to knock the ball loose. But he's really adept at zone coverage. You watch him in zone, and it's like watching, the meme where it has the guy sitting there and he has all the numbers floating around his head and he's just trying to figure everything out. That's Smith Snowden in zone coverage. He's trying to figure out the third, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth, and the seventh option, and the quarterback is still on read number 2. He also tracks the ball well, shows a natural skill for forcing turnovers. So again, this is a guy, if you're not a fan of Utah football, I strongly encourage you to become one, especially if you love offensive line play or you love cornerback play. Smith Snowden's a guy you definitely want to watch. And then we finally get to the big shebang, safeties. Obviously, the big name on the list is Caleb Downs from Ohio State. And, Heather, who's a Ohio State podcaster, who's joined us on the Draft Professors. Jacob Roach, who's an Ohio State fan as well, joined us here on Wednesday nights. He will probably tell you he's probably screaming at somewhere in middle Ohio right now that I'm not, ravishing over Caleb Downs, but we're going to save some time here and cover everyone else too. But guys like Dylan Thieneman, formerly of Purdue, now at Oregon, Random Fontenot from Vanderbilt, Kamari Ramsey, now at USC, and even guys that went back to school, Xavier Nwankpa from Iowa, Keon Sabb from Alabama. But the big one I want to make sure we hit is Isaac Smith from Mississippi State. Again, a must-watch guy, because this guy, he's got really good hips. He's very fluid. He's like a salsa dancer when he's out on that field. Just fluid hips, good speed, good pacing, good tempo. Built a little bit more like a corner than he is a safety, but he can play the safety position well, and he's not afraid to lay the hit and lay the boom on some folks. Very violent hands. He will throw a wide receiver out of the club like he's a bouncer. And the game I often hearken back to is his Tennessee game, where he had 20 tackles, 9 of them by himself. He was all over the place. As a safety, to have that many tackles, you're doing something right in run support. So definitely a guy to keep on your must-watch list as you move through 2025. And EJ's obviously coming in with more names. Avion Terrell and Traden Stukes, 2 guys definitely we're going to add to the list. Definitely some names to watch. And that's the best part about these preliminary lists for 2026, especially all of us here at the Draft Professor, all 40 or so of us, just throwing names up on the board. It's almost like the scene in Moneyball where he's just writing names down on the magnet and throwing them behind him. It's kind of what we're doing here right now. This isn't, hey, we're going to think that Amari Campbell's the top linebacker and Isaac Smith's the third safety. These are the guys you need to watch. If you want to get into the scouting industry and you're not sure where to start, this list of guys is a good list to start with, especially the ones that with the star. Those are the must-watch guys because those are guys that wherever you watch the tape, they pop. Whether it's the first game of the season, the last game of the season, they just flash, they pop, and you're like, I need more. And then you're up at 3 a.m. looking through Utah tape like a madman like me.
Yeah. So let's kind of go through a couple of the lists. So, like, I think one of the things that some people will find funny, Jalen Catalon, I think he could have been in like any of the last 4 drafts, right? So he's like going to be like a 24 or 25-year-old.
Yeah.
Right.
He's going to be up there in years with Catalan, but that's not a knock on him. That's just, I don't think he's really found his right home yet. When you look at his game, this is a guy, he spent time at Arkansas, he spent time at Texas, he spent time at UNLV. To my knowledge, I don't think he's declared anywhere as of yet. I'm going to actually double check that now as we speak. I know he was interested in a few folks, but I don't think he'd actually really declared anywhere yet. No, it looks like it's still.
And as we were doing scouting reports this year, just on the safety list, Keon Saab, I think a lot of people had in the top 100. Right? So he was going to be probably somewhere between 75 and 125 had he came out this year. So I would say, like, that's a name that sticks out. I know that when Randall, you and I did scouting reports, Isaiah Reed from Brown has transferred to UCF.
Yes.
And we had him fringe top 100, right? And that was when he was at Brown.
Yeah. Yeah, that was when he was at Brown, and now he's at UCF, which fringe 100. I remember I was probably right at that 100 mark, and Randall was probably right there as well. But that's a guy definitely to keep your eye on at UCF. Looks like that Jalen Catalon is at Missouri. He ended up with Missouri. Looks like he committed there on January 5th. So again, if you like Missouri football, you can do the same thing. Throw a dart at someone on the field, and you're probably going to end up hitting a top-tier talent. But, I mean, there's other names on the list, too, like Damani Jackson from Alabama. That was a guy that I had firmly in my top 75 and ended up going back to school just because he had track speed, and this was a guy that was a burner. And that's the cool part about when we start to shift from 25 into 26 and we start to shift into the next class is you have guys that, you really love and that you're like, hey, this is a guy I loved, really wanted to see him. He was a top 75, top 100, top 125 guy for me. And then he ends up going back to school. And now you're like, okay, now I can look at him in a new lens because, he was top 125 last year. But let's look at his tape a little deeper over the summer and see if he still holds that ranking. But then also, what kind of tape is he going to put up on the new season? Isaiah Reed at UCF, what kind of tape are we going to see at a higher level of competition?
Yep. And then you had mentioned Damani Jackson. There was at least one draft professor that had a first-round grade on him had he stayed in this class. Mansour Delane was probably top 100. Tacario Davis definitely would have been top 100 if he had came out this year. So right there, like I love how you said it looks like it's a deep corner class. I would definitely second that just based on when we did scouting reports where those guys fell when we were evaluating them in October of this year. So
exactly. And when we looked at like Tacario Davis, I'm glad you called that out. When we looked at him, he was one of the guys at the top of the cornerback class in 25 before he went back that didn't have an injury concern. This was a guy that I distinctly remember me and Randall were talking about it. He could have been the third corner off the board in 2025.
Yes.
Because he was healthy. He was tall. He had the size. Obviously now going back, does that make him a favorite for the number one in 2026? Potentially, but there's also some talented folks that may have a question about that. But that is another name to watch when you're looking at corners, because the question becomes, if he was that good, why go back to school? And it's different for every person. Some people, they want to go back to school, finish their degrees. Some people, they want to go back to school, they want to challenge themselves. Tacario Davis's case, wanted to go back to school. His defensive coordinator was at Washington. He now wanted to go play with a defensive coordinator because he knew that coordinator knew how to effectively use him and raise his stock even further. So he's another name. Definitely put a red star by and circle as we move through the summer.
Yep. So, Bill, this year for the 2025 draft, that's going to happen in about 3.5 weeks. How many linebackers do you have in your top 100?
That is a great question. Let me pull up my big board right now. And
that's like Walker, Campbell, Schlesinger, Knight, maybe Pupal, maybe one other.
So I currently have 6 linebackers in my top 100. And of those 6, Campbell, Walker, Schlesinger, Carter, Chris Paul, Jack Kaiser.
Okay, Barrett Carter. Okay, yep. Okay. So the reason I point that out is, so 6 linebackers in the top 100. This is my opinion is this is kind of a deep or at least middle tier linebacker class. Mm-hmm. We may not have, we have 2 that might go in round 1. So that's actually pretty good.
Yep.
Right. We don't usually see 2 linebackers go in round 1. But the reason I point that out is Harold Perkins had a first round grade from Josh had he came out this year.
Yep.
And then Josh had a top 50 grade on Sonny Styles when he went back. So already there's 2 linebackers here that look like they would be, let's say, at the top of the class, plus, as you said, your must-watch is Amari Campbell. So if I were to just look at this slide, we could be starting to say, hey, let's add some more linebackers to this list, because this is, between Deontay Lawson adding some depth and Jason Barham and Lander Barton is the guys that would be like that next tier of linebackers back. That looks pretty good in my opinion.
No, I agree with you. I had a late first, early second round grade on Harold Perkins. He was probably linebacker 3 on my big board, right behind Campbell and Jalen Walker, just because I classify Walker as a linebacker. So for him to go back, he's in the running to be linebacker number 1. Obviously, the question marks around his injuries and what's that going to look like for him at LSU in his final season. But again, him, Sonny Styles, another one at Ohio State, definite, very good talent. But, Deontay Lawson from Alabama defenders seem to grow on trees at this point, even with Saban gone and with DeBoer down there, still can definitely make some moves. But then guys like Drake Bowen at Notre Dame, the same thing. We've seen how many Notre Dame defenders, Jack Kaiser, Xavier Watts, Riley Mills, Howard Cross, Drake Bowen now at Notre Dame this season. Could he be that next Notre Dame defender that we're talking about next year?
And Demetrius Knight goes to South Carolina, right?
Yep, that is correct.
So, EJ, if you're still listening, you had the other linebacker from South Carolina. Like when you did your linebacker big board, EJ identified the other South Carolina linebacker as being somebody that he would take a late round flyer on. And then Sean Murphy is on this list. So it'll be interesting to see, what does Sean Murphy do without that South Carolina defense in front of him, right? Emin Wari's gone.
Right.
TJ Sanders is gone, right?
Yeah.
So I would definitely be paying attention to Sean Murphy.
Yeah, exactly.
If he's already made the list, to me, that's a name to watch out for, because we're probably going to have more tape on him for his next college season than we do now, based on who he was playing behind.
Right. And I'd say Jeremiah Alexander as well from Clemson, because Barrett Carter obviously takes a lot of the shine out of the Clemson linebacker room, but now he's in the NFL, the NFL draft as of this moment, but in the NFL, if you're watching after the fact. So he's going to be a guy that you definitely want to keep an eye on. Jason Barham out of Michigan, Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant, 2 big defensive tackles that opened a lot of gaps for those Michigan linebackers. They're now in the NFL. So how does Barham kind of rebound from that? And what does he do to kind of advance his game forward going into the summer and into 2026?
Yeah. So a couple of other things for anybody listening. So the Draft Professor site is going to be modified a little bit so that as people are watching players and you're trying to get your watch list, we're going to have a section of the site dedicated to who are we watching. And if you stay tuned far enough into the summer, you'll start to get a board towards the end of the summer. But we're going to try to focus most of the content on who are we watching as opposed to what is the big board. And if you need to read between the lines, my opinion, with part of what, let's say, what the draft community needs to do better is let's not focus on what a preliminary big board is in May. Let's just talk about here's guys we like and let a season sort out where they stand on a board. But we don't necessarily need a board 10 months before the draft. So
right.
We'll be giving you our watch lists, and eventually you'll start to see a ranked or tiered board, but you're not going to see that until close to July or August.
Right. So. And the way I equate it to is you have the NFL draft as a neighborhood, right? You have houses in every part of the neighborhood. You have the really nice houses, the just the one style ranches. Everybody's moving into the neighborhood. And at a certain point, as a realtor, the guy making the board, you got to figure out what do those players want from their house. So what do those players do? Where do you have them graded? Okay, so these players only like 2 stories, and these players are the 3-story homes, and these players are the ranches, and these players are the snowbird. I'm only going to be here in the summer. And then once you've got them kind of all placed around, now you can start getting people in the house. You can start getting them in the house they like based on what it looks like on the outside. So in the beginning, when you're making a big board, you're going to have a lot of names, but they're not all going to have a tier. Typically, in my experience, my tiers typically won't come until after Labor Day at the earliest. And even then, it would still be here's my round 1 tier. I got 6 names. They're all there. We're going to shuffle them around a little bit as we move through the first couple weeks of the season. Then we lock in. I've got a round 2 tier. There's 5 names here. We shuffle them all around. And you just move down that list. There's a lot of, hey, May 1st, I got to get my 2026 big board out. The problem is there's still players that are trying to find a home. You've got freshmen that are coming on campus that could be taking some of these jobs. And just because these guys are must watch doesn't mean they're automatically locked into winning their job. You know, if a true freshman comes on to Utah's campus and lights up as a corner, Smith Snowden may not have a job. So that's kind of where, we have to say, okay, well, who are the players we need to watch? Who are the names we need to look at? Everybody's draft eligible. Who do we need to focus and hone in on? Okay, we focused in on these 200 players. Now we've got this list of 200, so let's put them in a bucket. So this is the bucket of round 1, round 2, round 3. And then once we've got them in a bucket, then we can kind of start to rank them a little bit. And we can start to say, okay, I like these 2 guys more, these 2 guys a little less. And then you move them from this bucket to this bucket, and it's a big shell game. But that's the fun part of the draft community, is just kind of moving them all around the board.
Yep. And I appreciate anybody that is, catching the podcast. I see Andy and EJ in the chat, 2 different draft professors. We want to reach out to the draft community, share who we're watching, and we want to communicate with you. So if you're watching this podcast on YouTube, drop a comment. Just even if it's just, hey, Jim, or hey, Bill, leave a comment. We have a pretty good feeling that this podcast is going to be watched a few times over the summer as people are trying to figure out who to watch. Every week, we're going to have a draft professor adding to this list. The draft professors have all had the top 68 schools have been divided across 16 draft professors. So as the draft professors are watching the 4 schools that are assigned to them, we're going to start to see more players added to this list. And then September, October, we will start having draft professors podcasts with other draft professors about who they've watched, who they like. And that's going to be how some of that tiered board that Bill mentions gets built for nearly every draft professor. So, so Bill, do you want to remind everybody how they can find your great content?
Absolutely. So you can find a majority of my content over on X at Spark Scouting. A lot of my written work is going to be over at the Right Way Sports Network. That's TWSN.net. I have a lot of NFL content, NFL draft content. Not only do I focus on my Cleveland Browns, but I cover all 31 teams as well, other 31 teams, so 32 in total as well. But yeah, you can find me over on X at Spark Scouting, as well as TWSN.net. Another thing, I know Jim talked about it, adding a comment, making sure you like this video, you share it, you turn on that notification bell and subscribe to the Draft Professor channel so we can keep bringing you this great content. There's 40 of us draft professors, sometimes even more, that we work hard in the lab, and Jim, our lovely moderator this evening, he puts us all together in a room and says, hey, let's all figure it out. And we appreciate Jim for that. We don't say it enough, but we should. But make sure you like the video, make sure you share the video, make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel at Draft Professor and turn on that notification bell. And make sure you follow Jim too. He is the mastermind behind all of this that makes it go. He's an NFL draft fanatic, no I in fanatic on X. And also make sure you check out the website. Make sure you check out probably one of the best mock draft simulators out there. Scratch that. Not one of the best, but the best. Take that, PFF. The best mock draft simulator out there, but definitely a fun time. If you're still looking for 2026 names to watch, I caution you to keep coming back to this list, come back to the channel. We're going to have more names. This 100 or so guys isn't the end all be all. Coming into this year, into the 2025 class, I had 450 plus names on my big board graded and comped and organized. And it started just like this, throwing a list of names together and saying, all right, this summer I'm getting in the lab. I'm just going to grind out some tape and put together the best 250 to 300 guys we got.
Yep. So from the standpoint of, bringing all the draft professors together, having you involved is a huge asset. So Bill Sparks' board, second to none. Part of running a draft simulator is there needs to be a player list to add. Right. That's part of the challenge of running a simulator. You need to know which players are eligible. Mm-hmm. Bill's board goes a long way to make sure that there is a player list available in the simulator. So I appreciate you being involved with the channel. As Bill said, if you can subscribe on YouTube, that is the biggest thank you that you can give. Drop a comment if there's players missing. Andy, you've dropped one in here. You've dropped another one here. Mm-hmm. EJ dropped a couple more here. So if you have other players to watch, that's what we do, right? We're not here to tell you. We're here to work with you. So again, if you are watching tape and you're grinding tape, please and thank you. Drop a couple names for us to watch in the chat. And we will have a draft professor watch them, get back to you, probably thank you, and we can work together because that's part of what all of this is. So,
right.
But we've been going for long enough. It's a Wednesday night. So, Bill, thank you for everybody watching. Thank you. And from the 50 podcasters at the Draft Professor, thank you for watching, everybody. And we'll see you on a podcast again tomorrow.
Have a good night.